Hello and welcome back to another episode of GameCyc Weekly. My name is Danny and this is the show where we talk about gaming news, reviews, opinions, thoughts, all of that good stuff. And this week I'm going to keep it very simple and straightforward. We're going to talk about COCOON, a wonderful little game, and I'm going to avoid talking about any kind of industry stuff because I think we had enough of that last week with my giant whinge, and I want to be more positive this week. So we're going to be talking about a very good game. COCOON, this came out last week or at least a couple of days ago, and it is developed by Geometric Interactive and published by Annapurna Interactive, and it was directed by Jep Carlsen, who is notable for being a former lead designer, I believe, at Playdead Studios, so the folks who brought us Limbo and Inside. And in some ways, this feels like a spiritual successor to those games. Now, those are two games that I absolutely loved when they came out. I loved the simplicity of the design, the atmosphere, the mood, and how cleverly designed all the puzzles were. So I was very much looking to this just based on the pedigree behind it, the people involved, and also the gameplay trailer was like really slick and I was like immediately excited for it. However, I also wanted to be a little bit cautious about this when looking forward to this game because I'd been bitten before by another indie puzzle game developed by people who were formerly at Playdead, and that game's name was Somerville, and that it is a game that, despite having some cool moments in it, had such a garbage ending that it kind of tainted the entire experience for me. And despite it having similar vibes to Limbo and Inside, by the end of it kind of felt more like a hollow imitation of certain aspects of those games. So when this game comes out being an indie puzzle game developed by previous Playdead people, I was slightly cautious about getting too excited for it. However, all of that aside, this game is wonderful. It is such a perfect game. It is a top-down puzzle game where you play as a weird little insect thing, a really cool looking insect thing. You arrive on a planet and you just start doing puzzles. And the thing that makes this game so wonderful is that it has a central mechanic, and this is very rare, by the way, at this point in time in the industry. It has a central mechanic that is both unique, new, and very interesting. So it's not just going through the motions of copying mechanics or being inspired by mechanics from other games and then like reinterpreting those to create new challenges, which is perfectly valid, but it does get older after a while. No, what COCOON has done has just come up with something entirely unique. I'm going to do my best to explain this. The central mechanic of COCOON is that the world you play in is contained within a physical sphere or orb. I'm going to call it an orb. Each world that you're in is contained within an orb. Now, that orb you can exit out of. So you can leave that world and go into a world that's a level above that. You can do that, and you can also carry the orb that contains this world that you were just in. You can carry it, you can bring it around and plop it down at other fixed points in this other level. But each orb also has a different ability that applies to you when you carry the orb. So you pick up one orb and it will now show you hidden paths, or you pick up one orb and it will shoot a projectile or something. Very cool. But also, each orb can also power machinery in levels. So there are points where you have to drop off an orb at a particular point to power up a door or a platform or something else. But also, you can carry different orbs into other orbs when you enter other orbs, and then have that orb be used as part of a puzzle within another orb. It becomes mind-bendingly creative with how they make use of this mechanic. And it goes from being this deceptively straightforward game where you don't actually have many abilities to start with, and it just becomes this clusterfuck of everything where you're trying to think about the abilities you can gain from each different orb, to the position of that orb within the space you're currently in, as well as orbs within orbs and how different other things can affect not only an orb at the first level, but an orb within that orb. And I'm pretty sure I'm getting to the stage now where I've said orb so many times it's becoming a meaningless word, so yeah. Without the orbs, only things you can actually do are you can move around and then press buttons and push and pull objects. That's actually like your kind of base skill set. But like with Inside and like with Limbo, what the designers have done is maximize those actions. So even though it's stuff technically we've seen before, it's done in an interesting way, it's done in a creative way, and it's done in a way that is very elegant. Elegant is the word that was coming to my mind constantly whilst playing Cocoon. It is minimalist game design almost, the way that there is no fat in any puzzle, in any level. There is not a moment where your time is being wasted for the sake of making the game longer or appear bigger or to justify the cost or whatever else. It is purely going from one unique experience to the next, and that is something that so many games should adhere to, and it makes the experience so much more fun. And the game just elegantly goes from such a simple premise and a simple set of mechanics and just evolves. It incorporates the new mechanics perfectly. It does the incredible thing of having no dialogue and does nothing to explain any of what's going on, either in terms of the world or what you can do. Everything is shown to you visually within gameplay. It is perfect. It is the kind of thing that it is so satisfying in a way that you almost don't comprehend it whilst you're playing it. It's not until afterwards you think about it and go, oh yeah, that was really cool. And it's kind of insane just thinking like how much of the game where all the controls you've got are your analog stick to move around and you're pressing one button for interaction, and that's it. At no point do you ever have to press more than one button, but it feels like you're doing so many things despite it being essentially a one button game. And it is pretty much like 90% a puzzle game, and then there's 10% boss fights. And then the puzzles, they do the very kind of classic great game design thing of just escalating perfectly and growing in complexity as your abilities grow. There were a couple of times where I did get stumped by a couple of the puzzles, but this is the thing, like I got stumped and then I got very frustrated, but this is a good thing. The reason I was getting very frustrated was because in my head I was like, there's only like 3 mechanics, there's only like 3 things I can do that I can think of that would solve this current puzzle, and then the game would blow my mind by showing me that there was actually a 4th way to solve something using the abilities available to me. And it was just those moments of like knowing how limited your skill set is and still having to find ways around that to solve these puzzles. So it creates a great sense of frustration because I'm in my head, I'm like, this is impossible. It's literally impossible. And then a couple of minutes later thinking, oh, it wasn't that impossible, actually. There's a handful of boss fights, one for the end of each world that you're in, and they are also equally very creative. They are challenging. They make use of the mechanics perfectly. They manage to toe the line of being challenging at times without being frustrating. Like even the whole process of how you get defeated is like incorporated into the game in a really nice way, which just kind of it just exudes creativity like in every way. It's wonderful. If I had to have one whinge about the game, and I think this might be my only whinge, and it's not even much of a whinge, it's just something that kind of caught me off guard, is there is a bit of inconsistency with the difficulty of the boss fights. So there were 1 or 2 boss fights in the middle, which completely destroyed me a couple of times and took some serious focus for me to get past. But in latter stage boss fights, not so much. So that was a bit weird. And again, maybe it's just by then I'd kind of caught on to how on how to think about these boss fights to the point where they weren't as difficult. And again, not really much of a critique. It's more just an oddity. But that was the only thing I could really think of. And another, in terms of creativity, that also extends to the look and sound of the game. It looks wonderful. I know I keep referring back to Limbo and Inside, but it really does feel like a spiritual successor in the sense that, it's not a 2D platformer, but it still carries the same kind of vibe. It carries the same kind of design sensibilities. It feels like if this game had just come from Playdead Studios, it would feel like it would fit in. It's slightly less horrific than those games, but you can see the line of creativity from those games to here. And yeah, and I don't know, by the end of the game, I had a really big smile on my face just because it was a very satisfying conclusion in terms of like the gameplay stuff. I'll talk about story in a second, but in terms of just the experience of experiencing this game, the sounds, the visuals, the polish. It's probably the most polished game I've played this year. Like at no point did anything ever look out of place. Nothing ever glitched. Nothing ever looked out of place. It was nice. It was just this perfect little experience. My playthrough came in at 6 hours, and to me that was perfect. Would I have liked another couple of hours? No. I think this actually is a great length for it, because I got to the end and I thought, cool, that's about as much as my brain can take. Any less than this, maybe it would have been it would have felt a bit undercooked, but I don't know, 6 hours to me, it was perfect. So very, very happy with it. And I said I was going to talk about the story, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if there was one. You start the game, your character looks like they crash land into this world, and then you just go. No tutorial, no introductory text, no dialogue or anything. It's just you crash, you land, you gain control of this character, or you can now control the character. Again, there's not even button prompts, there's not even on-screen prompts for anything. When I say minimalist, I mean minimalist. Like, there is nothing to indicate what you're meant to do explicitly. Everything is kind of implied diegetically within the world. So yeah, it's so I'm sure there's a story. I'm sure someone will be able to explain like all the underlying themes or something. But all I know is that it was very polished. You play a bug. All the characters are bugs, but they're kind of like cool alien bugs, and it's a very cool aesthetic that it got going for this game. And then the ending, it was like satisfying, but again, in terms of gameplay and kind of like what the final reveal of everything is, and you're like, this is nice. There's no like big twist or giant revelation or anything, but it just ends in a nice way that I found aesthetically and in terms of vibes very pleasing, which is why I sat through the credits again smiling and being like, that was cool. And keep in mind, I only got like 60%. Like when I finished, I checked the completion rate. I got like 60% of the achievements. So if anyone is concerned about like, gameplay length or wanting to get the full experience, you probably can get way more out of it with repeated playthroughs. But I mean, yeah, that's essentially it. Like, if for a game to leave you with that feeling of like, that was cool, I think that's kind of like the ultimate compliment you can give to something. It's nice to have sat with this thing for 6 hours, enjoyed it, and now just want to tell all my friends, go play it. Won't take you long, but you'll love it. I think that's kind of like the ultimate praise I can give to a game. And yeah, it's great. Really happy to see a brand new game, a brand new IP from a small studio doing well and being good, and kind of being the absolute opposite of giant, time-wasting, indulgent games. It's nice to see that there's still cool stuff being made. So yeah, fully recommend it. It's on Game Pass. I have no idea if it's on other platforms. I imagine if it isn't, it will be soon, or will be at some point. If it isn't exclusive to Xbox, get yourself an Xbox and play it, because it is sweet. And yeah, very much looking forward to seeing whatever Geometric Interactive does next, because this was cool, and I want to play more of it. I think it's the first game where I'm like, if they did introduce a DLC of like, a DLC pack of like more stuff for a game, this would be one of the only times where I'd actually consider buying it, just because I love the mechanics and the world that it's in. Just being in the world is cool. It's cool to be in someone else's, artistic vision and just to experience it. So yeah, I imagine there's like a 99% chance they'll never do a DLC for this kind of thing. But if they did, I'd buy it. And yeah, that's this week's episode of GameCyc Weekly. It's a nice gushy episode about a good game that everyone should play. I'm sure next week we'll get back to whinging about some horrific stuff. But for now, we'll just keep it positive. So yeah, in terms of positivity, thank you for listening. If you found this to be a positive episode, please be positive and give it a thumbs up or like or review or a recommendation or a subscription or anything else that you think would be a nice thing to do. So yeah, thanks for listening. Catch you next week. Bye.